You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back, book lovers and listeners. And you're going to be happy because we here at BOOKSTORM are listening to you. And dozens of you wrote in and said, we have got to read this book, The Bodyguard by Katherine Center. We did. We laughed until we cried. And then it also struck us so very strongly. This is entertaining but meaningful. We're thrilled to have Katherine Center with us today. I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's the New York Times best-selling author of 8 books. She writes laugh and cry books about how life knocks us down and how we get back up. Dallas Morning News calls her stories satisfying in the most soul-nourishing way. Her books have made countless best lists, including Real Simple, Amazon, Goodreads, and the best-selling author, who we also adore, Emily Henry, calls this book, The Bodyguard, a shout of pure joy. Now, we want to tell all of you listeners, because you've got to look at the Netflix series, the movie adaptation of Katherine's novel, The Lost Husband, starring Josh Duhamel, hit #1 on Netflix. And her novel, Happiness for Beginners, is in production now as a Netflix original starring Ellie Kemper. We're so happy to have Katherine here with us today from her hometown, Houston, Texas, where she lives with 2 children and their fluffy but fierce dog. Welcome. So happy to have you, Katherine.
Thanks for having me here. This is so fun.
Katherine, we like to give our listeners a little bit of the background of the book. So if you'll allow me, I'll just kind of give a little bit of a summary, but I'm not going to give away any spoilers. If you want to add anything at the end, please be our guest to do that. First of all, The Bodyguard is a funny, witty, delightful story in every sense with great emotional depth. This story centers around Hannah Brooks, who looks more like a kindergarten teacher than the highly trained lethal bodyguard she is. She's an executive protection agent who is itching to go on her next assignment, anywhere but Texas. But she just got hired to protect superstar actor Jack Stapleton from a stalker, a middle-aged corgi-breeding woman who also knits quite well. In Texas, she is not happy. Jack Stapleton is a household name. He is famous for, and I love this line from your book, rising out of the waves in all manner of clingy board shorts and glistening like a Roman deity. But a few years back, in the wake of a family tragedy, he had dropped from the public eye. When his mom gets sick, he returns to their Texas ranch, and Hannah is hired to be his bodyguard. But there's one catch. He doesn't want his family to know that he needs a bodyguard, and so he and Hannah pretend, against her better judgment, to be boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, what could go wrong? And they do this even though her ex-boyfriend basically says nobody would buy that you two are boyfriend and girlfriend. I really liked that whole theme running through the book. Hannah hardly believes it herself, but the more time she spends with Jack, the more real it seems. But that is where the heartbreak might be, because it's easy for her to protect people, but maybe not so much protecting her heart. Did you want to add anything to our little summary there?
No, I mean, I think that's great. You know, I think this is the first book I've ever written that can really sort of fit beautifully into like one sentence. So here's the sentence. A woman bodyguard has to protect a famous actor by pretending to be his girlfriend on a Texas ranch. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's basically, perfect. That's all the big pieces of the story right there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's what the story is. And it's just like it's like a fun romp, but I agree with you. It's got a lot deeper themes running through it, and of healing and, you know, opening yourself up to being vulnerable and sort of bigger stuff.
Well, if you're ready, we're ready to dive right into those themes because we saw them too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're so excited. I do have to say, I told Kristen, I got a hold of this first, and I said, it's just such a great escape, but so poignant. And I loved this character, Hannah Brooks, who is the bodyguard. But she struggles with whether or not she's lovable because of her past romantic experiences. And she says, and I want to quote this, was I lovable? I mean, are any of us really lovable if you overthink it? So I decided something right then. Every chance you take is a choice to decide who you are. And as the reader, this hits so strong as a life lesson, because at some point in our lives, we have to stop listening to what other people say about us. We have to become who we know we are inside. And I wanted to ask you as a writer, I'm so curious, did you create this character out of a past experience, out of someone you may have known or heard about in the public eye? And what do you believe about all of us being lovable?
You know, that's such a great question. I mean, I think that part of Hannah is definitely like me, you know, like I've definitely struggled with that kind of stuff. I'm a sort of classically overlooked middle child, you know, in this, I'm like the middle girl of like 3, and I wasn't really overlooked, but as a kid, you know, I was always wanting to kind of get attention and prove myself. And I definitely have worried about that. I mean, I think we all have worried about it, right? So what I like about what Hannah goes through in the story is that she kind of shifts from thinking that love is something that you wait for, right? That love is something that you sort of passively hope will happen to you, that, you know, if the right person comes along, that, you know, you might get love bestowed upon you. She kind of shifts her thinking about it, and it starts to be a much more active thing for her, you know, that love becomes something that you do. You know, love is something that you generate your own self and you give out to the world. And that's a much more sort of powerful way of coming at it. You know, I think when I was little, I used to think that love was a thing you had to wait for and hope for. And now that I am older, you know, and wiser, I realize that love is a thing you make, you know, and you make it for other people. And when you do that, you wind up giving it to yourself. So I think her journey is to see it in a much more active way, and to kind of take it for herself as a much more sort of powerful act that she can do rather than wait for.
Mm-hmm. And also, as readers and just people living in the real world, a lot of times, because of past relationships, we think that love is something we have to earn. Mm-hmm. And Hannah, that you showed us with her boyfriend that she just breaks up with before she becomes the bodyguard for Jack, he sort of tells her that she wasn't good enough. And at one point, he even tells her, you're not even a good kisser. And that struck so strong with me. I got mad about that. I'm like, who are you to say? Maybe someone else thinks she is a good kisser, you know?
Yeah. I loved writing that moment because I knew, you know, as the writer, that Jack Stapleton was going to come along at some point and prove that guy wrong. And I was so excited, anticipating when that moment would happen. So yeah, I think that her ex-boyfriend, Robbie, who Jack intentionally calls Bobby throughout the whole story just to insult him to get his name wrong. I think that Robbie is kind of like the worst voice in her head, right? Robbie is telling her all of the worst fears that she has about herself, that she's not pretty enough, that she's not good enough, that she's not smart enough, that she can't do this. And Jack, you know, manages to kind of be the opposite of that. Jack, you know, and that wasn't really intentional. It just kind of happened as I was writing, you know, as I tried to imagine like a man you would want to get away from. That wound up being Robbie and all the terrible things he says. And as I thought about a man you would want to spend a lot of time with and, you know, be around, that was Jack, just thinking everything she could do was awesome. There's a moment early on when he finds out she's his bodyguard, and he thinks she's a little short, you know, to be his bodyguard, because he's like 6'2" and she's like 5'5", and he dares her to flip him, right? And because he kind of doesn't think she could do it. I mean, he's not sure. And then she does flip him. And there's this really great moment when he is like on his back in the grass and he's just admiring her so much. You know, he's just like, that was awesome. And so it's like the things about her that are great, he can see them and he can appreciate them. And I'm like, you know, that's the kind of person you want to have in your life, is the person who sees all the great things about you.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that does sum up love in a more healthy way. You shouldn't have to prove it. The other person should just see it. But I do have to say to you, I keep talking about that one scene. I've said it now 5 times to Kristen. I just love that scene where she flips him. I said to Kristen before you got on, I said, don't we wish we could all flip some big guy? That was just fantastic.
It was a very fun moment to write. It was great.
The other one I loved was where she was shooting, and he just thinks she is a badass.
That's a great
that
scene.
really struck one.
Yeah, when Doc Stapleton's like, if you can hit one of them, I'll give you a quarter.
That was awesome. One of the other things I loved about this novel is that you deal with the universal themes of grief and starting over and love in such relatable ways. And we talked about this character, but some of the characters are told, or she believes, that she doesn't even know what love is. That's what somebody tells her. And I was wondering, how does she, or anyone really, know exactly what love is? What are some of those hallmarks? And, you know, sometimes we think about the wrong things indicate love, right? Like jealousy or strong negative emotions. But I was wondering if you could comment on some of those hallmarks of true love.
Yeah, you know, I think that Hannah is really having to go through a process of getting better at love in the course of this story. And, you know, I always see love. I mean, I've been fortunate in my life to be with a really, really great man who I met when I was in my 20s, and being around him has made me like a better person. Like spending my life with him has made me happier and more secure. And it's been incredibly nourishing and healing. And I think that love itself, like actual love, not all the twisted, messed up, manipulative versions of it, but like the real thing, the good thing, is incredibly nourishing and healing. You know, there's a book I wrote called Things You Save in a Fire, when the main character is kind of having this argument with her mom about like what love actually is. And she's kind of listing all these terrible things that happen to you when you fall in love, right? You get jealous, you get possessive, you get crazy. And her mom is just like, none of those are love, right? That's not love. Like that's things that can happen, but it's not actually love. And so in my view, you know, love is the light. Love is the nourishing, healing, good stuff. And the only way that you can find it is by doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something you can just figure out from reading about it in a book. And it's not something that you can like memorize, like your multiplication tables. It's like any really deep sort of soul project that you might go through in life. It's about doing it, feeling your way through it, right? Trusting your own compass, and practicing and messing up and making mistakes. And I think I always love to write stories about people who find the emotional courage to let themselves fall in love with other people, because I do think it's a scary thing and there's lots of ways it can go wrong. And it's so powerful and it's so much bigger than you in this crazy way. But I love the courage of being willing to try, right? Knowing that you could get your heart broken, that you could get into a situation that's really hard to get out of, that you could make the wrong choice and pick somebody like Robbie who's super mean to you and, you know, suddenly has this access to you because you let yourself love that person. It's a risk, you know, it is a chance that you take when you decide to kind of open yourself up to somebody. But the payoffs are potentially really great if you can find your way towards the good stuff. And it's, you know, I think it's really about being willing to practice. I think as a culture, we tend to be pretty jaded about love. You know, we tend to kind of roll our eyes at it and be like, Hallmark invented it to sell Valentine's Day cards or, you know, whatever. We're very kind of cynical about it all. But I actually think that if we would take it seriously, you know, all kinds of love, but romantic love is definitely included, we could get better at it, you know, as a culture, and we could pay attention to it and value it. And then it has the potential to bring so much goodness into your life if you do it right.
I think that's so profound what you said, because thinking about love being something you do. In fact, there's a book called Love Does, and it was very revolutionary when it came out. But I love that because there's that sense of intentionality, and it's a mindset change that you intentionally adopt and then practice, and then it becomes second nature. And you're right. We don't teach people that that's how love should be. Sometimes we see people who model it, but otherwise you don't hear a lot of that in the popular culture. You know, in movies, it's, you know, boy meets girl, they instantly fall in love and everything's wonderful. I love that intentionality that you're talking about.
That's very profound. I love that. I also want to bring up the fact that you showed the reader to be very, very careful not to judge someone from outward appearances, because Hannah is very plain compared to the Hollywood people that Jack has dated, being such a famous actor. And Jack is this super strong, muscular, fit guy, but inside he's sort of a little bit of a sweet marshmallow guy, you know, so lovable, like teddy bear. And I just thought these characters were not at all what they appeared. Do you feel we miss out on a lot of relationships because of society's standards? And not even love relationships, but friendships, because someone doesn't look like someone that we would be friends with, or even business relationships. I'm not going to hire them. I don't know. They don't really fit the group. I think that's really I think we're coming out of that a little, but what do you feel about that?
You know, I think the best love stories are really about people who are able to see each other, you know, in these very true ways. And I agree with you that, you know, Hannah is just a sort of an ordinary person who gets thrown into this crazy situation where she has to be around, you know, the sexiest man alive. And, you know, when I first started writing this story, I was thinking that I might not make him the sexiest man alive, actually. Like, my idea was that maybe he would be sort of like a grouchy character actor, you know, and I thought, oh, I can give him like an eye patch, or like, you know, I had ideas for how to make him a star, but not like a cliche of a star. But, you know, I did actually have this moment when I was invited to come to the set of the Lost Husband movie, where I did get to meet Josh Duhamel, who stars in that movie. And he is, I mean, he's worth a Google. If you don't know who he is.
Oh, I know who he is.
Oh, we all know. Yes, we know.
And he's so incredibly dashing, and he's so incredibly movie starish, and he's so incredibly famous. And he just kind of like sparkles almost, you know, with this fame and this sort of handsomeness. And it was such a crazy moment when I got to meet him, because he was trying to like connect with me in this very human, normal way. You know, he kind of came over and he was like, so nice to meet you. I hear you wrote the novel. I'm Josh, you know, and I was like, I know who you are. Thank you very much. But it was this sort of crazy moment when all of the sort of physicality of him, right? The sort of handsomeness, and he's like 8 feet tall. I mean, he's enormous, and he's, you know, he's a movie star. All of that stuff was so overwhelming to me in that moment that I forgot how to talk. Like, I completely forgot how to talk. I just went totally silent. I was just standing there, like staring up and looking at him and like trying to answer his very easy softball questions. And all I could do is just make like little gurgling noises. Like, I could not form any human words. It was so, and my husband was like right there on the set. And he was what's going on with you? And I was like, I don't know, it's hormones. So it was this crazy moment that really stuck with me afterwards. I was like, what happened there? Because I mean, I don't know if y'all can tell, but like talking is like my favorite activity. Like, I love to talk. I should have aced that moment. And yet something happened, right? Something about the physicality of him got in the way, and I wasn't able to just like relate to him as just a person, right? You kind of tell yourself that theoretically, like, oh, they're just like us, they're just people. But I could not do that in the moment. I was like, he's a god among men, what's happening? So I loved all of that. Like, that was all really interesting to me, and I found myself sort of thinking about it afterwards. And so the temptation to make Jack Stapleton like that kind of guy and get to explore it a little bit was very strong. And so I just went with it. You know, I just made him like a super sexy movie star and decided to have some fun with it. But it did kind of allow me, you know, putting these sort of opposite things together to sort of explore some of that stuff a little bit. Here she is, just a totally normal person, right? Who looks like a kindergarten teacher. She's fine, but she is in no way like a star. And then here's Jack, and he's like kind of this beautiful man. And for the two of them to sort of see the real version of each other, to me, that was really fun. And it was exciting to kind of watch that happen, especially her, you know, because she in the book has a very similar experience when she first meets Jack. It's possible I borrowed some of that from my own actual life. But she, you know, it's this process of getting sort of past all of that. It's really fun to see it happen.
For the reader, it's so fun. It was the most beautiful romance, and we just got lost in it. And let me just say, on behalf of Kristen and I and all readers, thank you for making Jack Stapleton the sexiest man alive, because we enjoyed every description. Some of them I burst out laughing, because we do sort of think this, you know, in our brains without speaking it, and it was just wonderful, really wonderful.
Yeah, and I also love that you played on that theme of acting. You know, he was an actor, but there was also that theme of, you know, what we project to the world, what we have people believe about us. And I just thought that was very clever. And that's some of that depth we were talking about, that as you're reading, you're like, oh, that's amazing. That's really great. So maybe not as exciting as talking about Jack/Josh, but one of your characters copes by escaping when things get very difficult. And this theme really resonated with me, because I was thinking about what we do in today's society to avoid dealing head on with some of the very difficult things that come along. And given the number of ways that people can distract themselves, I was wondering if you thought that escapism is a growing concern or maybe a necessary coping skill.
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, I mean, this was my pandemic book, right? Like, I was writing this book in the weirdest, creepiest, you know, grayest parts of the pandemic. And it was really how I made my own sunshine. You know, I mentally was escaping just by writing this story, you know, and it's like, you know, the movie star part is kind of a little high concept. And even like, there really are women bodyguards, but it's not the most common job in the world, right? And so that was a little bit of a stretch. But then the Texas ranch part of it, I am from Texas, and my family does actually operate a working cattle ranch. So that part of it was very real. And so that sort of lent an air of authenticity to it. But I found that for me, just writing the story was kind of an escape. You know, I would mentally travel, because like I was like quarantining in the house with like my two teenagers who were not super excited to be there. You know, my very neurotic dog, you know, my husband, he's an outdoor guy. He likes to go out and do stuff. And he was like stuck in the house. In fact, there's a moment when Hannah talks about how she's a shark and she always has to be moving and she has to get water through her gills. That's my husband. He's that person. He always needs to be moving. And so we were all like stuck together, you know, upsides and downsides to that. But writing the book was a kind of escape for me. It gave me this sort of sunshiny, hilarious, romantic, adorable, open, spacious, safe place that I could sort of mentally go as a break from like the reality of the news cycle. And, you know, I mean, because it does not take much for me in life to be like, yeah, we're all going to die. Like, I was not super optimistic about our prospects at the start of the pandemic. So it was like it was a comfort to me, right? To write the book and to kind of mentally travel to this place where things were okay. And the other thing that I'll say about all of that is I really, really love stories about people who get knocked down by life and who have to figure out a way to get back up. Right? That's my favorite kind of story, hands down. And with Hannah, you know, she likes, like, her whole life is about escape, right? And the whole reason she works as an executive protection agent is because of the travel, because she can constantly be leaving and going on these adventures and kind of escaping her life. And so one of the things you always want to do with a character, if you like the kind of stories that I do, where people get knocked down, is do exactly the thing to them that they don't want you to do, right? And so she wants to leave desperately. She's like clawing at her cage to get out. And so, of course, you know, for me, the best thing I can possibly do to her is force her to stay put, right? Force her to sit still, force her to be in her life and not escape. So I think the book has both. Like on some level, it's valuing, you know, getting a break, right? Seeing a different way of doing things, seeing a different version of the world, seeing hope and possibility, and letting yourself just like enjoy comedy and joy and sunshine. All that stuff is definitely there. But you know, the other side of it is trying to value the wisdom that you can only gain through difficulty, through doing the things that you don't want to do, through getting knocked down by life and having to figure out how you're going to put things back together after everything's fallen apart. I mean, I think my books are always both. They kind of have this sort of hopeful, fun, swoony, romantic upside to them, where I really, really try to value joy, you know, and laughter and comedy and things getting better, right? And love and all the sort of sunshine. But I also feel like stories, and you guys were talking about this back at the beginning, really have to have darkness in them as well. Like you have to have both. The darkness and the light have to balance each other out, because that's the darkness and the hardship and the struggle and the being forced to do things you don't want to do. That's where wisdom comes from, right? That's where we as people find wisdom in our own real lives. And that's where we as readers gain wisdom through reading stories, because you kind of go through hardship with that main character and you come out the other side. It's almost like a cheat. You get to pull wisdom out of their story. You didn't really have to do it for real. You got like a virtual reality version, but you still get to take some of those life lessons out with you. So yeah, so for me, it's always kind of both. I think I'm always trying to balance, you know, the upsides and the downsides, and, you know, the darkness and the light. Is that a good answer?
Oh yeah,
Great
It's a great question.
and I really was thinking while you were talking about the fact that when we escape and we never come back to deal head on with the life lessons and the darkness and the other things, maybe that's when escapism is too much. And,
Yeah.
you know, we all know people who escape through alcohol or drugs or other, whatever it is.
Yep.
You can insert just about anything in there, right? Even being outdoors.
Right.
But I think that's where that balance comes into play. And I thought your book did a really nice job of showing how your main character worked through that and
Yeah.
being able to sit still and deal with her life head on and be in her place. It was fantastic.
Thank you. There's a great quote that I really, really love from Nora Ephron, where she says that reading is escape and the opposite of escape.
Oh,
And I think that's true. You know, I think stories take you out of yourself, take you somewhere else, but they also have this way of bringing you down deeper into yourself, right? And teaching you really profound lessons about who you are in the world. So yeah, so I think my favorite stories do both.
And, you know, we believe, we have some people that say, bring nonfiction onto your show. And we say, listen, fiction is real life. There's no story told fiction that's not real life, because we draw from personal experiences and hardships. But I want to tell you, Katherine, that you do know that they say the most intelligent people are those people who can make someone else laugh. People make light of comedians, but psychologists actually say they're the most intelligent. So that is you, because you made us laugh, but then you brought us into a reality that made us look inside ourselves and maybe learn something new, get a little bit of wisdom and advice moving into the future. And it was just a beautiful book. To all of our listeners in 25 countries and 50 states, including Hawaii, you have got to read this book, The Bodyguard by Katherine Center. And Katherine, can you give us a little glimpse of what you're working on next? What's on your radar?
Yeah, I've got some good things coming up. I've just turned in my next summer book, like the 2 days before The Bodyguard came out. I turned it in, and then I'm actually already starting to think about my 2024 book. Is that the right math? Yeah. Two summers from now. And it's funny because I can just, when you've got all the right elements for a story, like all the big pieces are kind of in place, it just starts blossoming in your head, you know, and it just starts coming to you and finding you and talking to you. And before you know it, you've had like 50 ideas and you're jotting them down, like grabbing a crayon and like a paper towel. And I'm very much at that phase on the 2024 book. So yes, I'm very excited about all the stuff that's coming up. There's lots of good things to look forward to.
Well, we're excited too. So yes, we're very happy that you're still thinking of ideas and writing, because you're bringing a lot of light to the world with this absolute joy. And we cannot thank you enough. I want to say to our listeners, you're going to want to connect with Katherine Center. You can find her on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you can even sign up for her newsletter. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Pleasure
Bye.
talking to you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again, hopefully.
I hope so too.
Wow, right?
Oh my
I
goodness,
mean, I
yes.
just adored every single ounce of this book. And we didn't have enough time to ask her all of the questions, but there was another quote I wanted to bring up to her. And it said, "We are very dismissive as a culture about heartbreak. We talk about it like it's funny or silly or cute, like it can be cured with a pint of Haagen-Dazs. But breaking up is a type of grief. It's the death of not just any relationship, but the most important one in your life. A person who loved you decided not to love you anymore." And that struck me so strongly, because we do tell people, just get over it. Well, they weren't meant for you. This is a good thing it ended. But you are grieving a loss.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I always think about it in conflict resolution terms, because that's something, I do professionally. And I always think about conflict in these difficult situations as an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity, first of all, to grow as a person and understand what your role may have been in the demise of the relationship. It's an opportunity sometimes to escape some very toxic or difficult things. To me, it's an opportunity to learn something new and do better, because we always say necessity is the mother of invention. Well, when you are in a situation where you have to fend for yourself, live on your own, or whatever after a breakup, you figure it out and you do it. And that there is an opportunity as well. But to me, it's also an opportunity really to shine a light for others on how to walk through adversity and difficulty. And we all learn from one another. And I think that's another great aspect and opportunity that comes along with grief and a breakup.
Mm-hmm. Also, in your experience, Kristen, I just wondered, I have a lot of friends who are in their 20s and 30s who we're friends, but I also mentor them. And sometimes coming out of a relationship, I will tell them, you have to be good with being alone. You have to be good with yourself before you can give into a relationship with another person. And sometimes I feel like them coming out of a broken relationship is the opportunity for them just to be alone and grow and heal and be not just comfortable but satisfied with just themselves. Do you find any of that in your consulting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it this way. We've talked about this before, where if you go into a new relationship and you are not a whole person, you will spend the rest of that relationship trying to get what you need from the other person. And I think that is really significant, because it's not fair to you and it's not fair to the other person, because that never ends well. We can't get what we need from other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other issues that struck you strongly?
Yeah, I loved something we talked about, and that is this idea of love and the hallmarks of love and what is actual love. And there were so many things that came up that I thought were interesting, but a lot of times we define love by what it's not, right? It's not jealousy. It's not toxicity. It's not emotions going all over the place. But what it is, to me, is that steady choice of choosing to respect someone, choosing at every turn to do what is for them and their best, to recognize their qualities, to really overlook sometimes some, foibles or things that they have or bad habits, and not really nitpick that person to death. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. And I think that there has to be empathy, and you have to be able to put that other person ahead of yourself, not every minute of every day, but oftentimes, especially when they need it most. And, I think of like at weddings, they always say that same thing. Love is patient, it's kind, it's gentle, it doesn't provoke to anger, it doesn't make you jealous, it's not trying to, if you look at that in modern terms, it would probably say it's not trying to manipulate or control or brainwash. It's just gentle. And I think that's what Katherine says. True love comes in a soft, gentle, kind way.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up.
Or at least that steady
Approach.
I think.
And I like what you said, purposeful.
Yeah.
It takes effort, determination, commitment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, what's on your radar, Chris?
Well, I love this book by Katherine Center. I just think that I learned so many things from this that I think I could share with my nieces and nephews and people, younger people who are in dating dilemmas and still trying to find their life partner. I hear these stories every day, all day, and love to try to help them as much as I can. But I'm going to take some of these little golden nuggets and wisdom and share it with them. How about you?
Well, I want to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu after reading
Yeah, me
this
too.
book. I love that. I thought this character was such a badass, and I just loved it.
I just loved every ounce of it. And in closing, thank you for joining us today. Shout out to this incredible, talented sound engineer and producer, the Mr. Mark Carey.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.
He's the reason we look good and sound good, except for this little cough I have here today, which I bet he can somehow manage to get out of it. And we're leaving you with a few storm predictions to pique your interest. We've got such a lineup. Ellen Marie Reisman has a new book that's coming out in August called The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. We have Lori Lico Albanese and Hester, Julie Clark, The Lies I Tell, Jamie Brenner, Guilt, Brendan Slocum, The Violin Conspiracy, Viola Shipman, The Edge of Summer, Alka Joshi, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Karen Unger, Secluded Cabin, Sleep 6, and Meg Waite Clayton, The Postmistress of Paris. Wow.
In the meantime, stay on the radar with Bookstorm by visiting our website at bookstormpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and if you'd like to see us in person, or better yet, one of our authors, you can view us on the video version of this podcast on YouTube. You can search for Bookstorm Podcast. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.